So good evening to you all. Thanks for being here this evening. As you know, this is our monthly work session that the council has on a regular monthly basis, and so our preliminaries are a little bit different tonight in the way we do business tonight is a little different. We won't be voting on regular town business per se, but tonight will be an information sharing and accumulating of information items that we will deal with and probably have on a future agenda. So we'll begin tonight's meeting by a roll call by our town clerk.
Mayor Marshburn?
I'm present.
Mayor Pro Tem Vance?
Here.
Councilmember Behringer? Here. Councilmember Singleton?
Here.
Councilmember Dellinger?
Here.
And Councilmember Matthews?
Here.
Okay, thank you so much, and thank you, council, for being present this evening. It's good to see all of you. First item of business is the adoption of the agenda, and so, council, I will ask you what your pleasure is.
Move to accept the agenda.
Second.
Okay, thank you. Motion properly made and seconded. If you favor the motion, vote aye.
Aye.
If there's any opposition, no, and there is none. Thank you. All right, we do have one presentation tonight, and I see the fire chief here, so I'm going to recognize him at this time, Mr. Matt Poole, and I believe he's going to be providing us with an annual report. Welcome, sir.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council and town management. It's my pleasure tonight to go review with you our 2022 annual report. So each year during this time period, we generally like to present this information to you as well as the public. It is listed on our website, so it's a public document. So I just want to spend a couple minutes tonight to go through the report. I won't read it verbatim, but maybe hit some highlights if that's okay.
Sure.
So each year we've done an annual report probably for the last 7 or 8 years. I'll have to get credit where credit is due. Our Assistant Chief of Administration, Chief Hathcock, designed this format, this template, and it's a really good layout. We've used it two years in a row. So it was done internally by one of our chief officers. But as we go through the document, one of the first pages is our mission, visions, and values. And obviously, if you or the public is concerned on what drives our daily operations, these things are what give our employees direction on how to operate. And then we do have a strategic long-range plan. So our plan is a 5-year plan, and these are our main strategic goals of our 5-year plan. So that strategic plan drives our annual report and also drives our budget. So our goal number 1 for us is organizational commitment towards continual process improvement. So we want to get better every day. Number 2 is to continue the fire department merger planning process with the town of Garner. Number 3 is enhance emergency response capabilities. 4 is departmental training and personnel development. 5 is fiscal resources allocation and replacement programs. 6 is improving our community risk reduction efforts. And then 7, and this is our newest goal that we've implemented, is improving information technology components such as policies, procedures, security, software, and hardware. So these 7 goals are broken down in our strategic plan into manageable objectives that we chip away at each year. So that's kind of what we're working on. And our plan, our current strategic plan runs until 2025. So our next page on page 5, and I won't go through these, but what our template has been for the last 2 years is just noting some administrative accomplishments for the organization. So we've broken accomplishments out into admin and operations. So just to hit some of the highlights, as you're well aware, we were obtained a ISO Class 1 rating from the Office of State Fire Marshal for inside the city limits of Garner, and then a Class 3 for the rural area. So we go through these, and these just hit some highlights of what the administration division accomplished over the last calendar year. This is our operational accomplishments, and so I'll touch on this probably in a little more detail. So what we've done is recognize employees that have received scholarships. So it is a vision of ours that we improve our educational level of our employees and especially our officers. So we do give a scholarship award, and these are the recipients of that, along with our Firefighter of the Year. And then this is an addition, in the next section is promotional advancements, new hires, and retirees. So we started capturing each year who we have hired, who's been promoted, and then any retirees that we have. And our Assistant Chief of Logistics, Donnie Lindsay, retired in December, so we wanted to make sure we acknowledged that. And then just the last box is just some accomplishments that operations had done throughout the year. So I won't go through those, just hitting the highlights. Where I do think is interesting is response statistics. So this is the rest of the report is more or less stats for the department. So in 2022, we provided service to our population of the fire tax district is 64,746 citizens. We serviced just under 80 square miles of district. And then in 2022, we ran 7,233 calls for service. And I'll get down in just a little bit, explain how many more calls that was in previous years. We had 11,248 responses, meaning some of those calls for service require more than one unit. And so these were the total amount of units that responded for those 7,233 calls. Our paid staff's training hours totaled 22,578. And then the next block breaks down our call volume into we think some areas that the public would like to see. So actual fires for us, so we had 207 fire calls. The majority of our calls are medical in nature, so we ran 4,499 medical calls. 153 hazmat calls. So those can be anything from fuel spills, it can be hazmat calls on I-40, anything that involves some form of hazardous material, those are responses in that category. Fire alarm activations or fire alarm calls, 734, and then we had 67 cardiac arrest calls. So we broke those out separately than medical calls. A really interesting stat is cost per incident. So I know Garner prides itself on having one of the lowest tax rates in the county. So we pride ourselves on as well having one of the lowest cost per incident rates, and ours is probably the lowest in Wake County at just over $1,000 per incident. That costs really per 1,000 residents $111. We started calculating in the last 2 years property saved. So in the responses that we responded to, we saved $2,002,316, and the amount of fire loss equated to that equals $6.67 per resident. So that's a fairly low stat when comparing national averages. Call demand. So I had touched on 7,233 calls. That increased 13.4% from last year. So this was our historic year for call volume, as well as a historic year for the percentage of increase as well. And then our unit responses increased 5%. Just kind of some fun stats is, so our busiest call demand by month, and they're all really relative. They ebb and flow some, but we don't have any major outlier months throughout the year. So you can see this was 2020, 2021, and 2022. Call demands by months. Call demand by fire station. So we currently operate 4 fire stations. In 2022, Station 1 and 3 were by far our busiest stations, and 2 and 4 the least busy. By day of the week is just a stat that shows, our days of the week. So Saturday in last calendar year was our busiest day of the week. And again, what we're looking for is trends. So when you look at time of day, when you look at days of the week, these are things where if there are outlier situations, you would adjust a shift schedule or peak hours of when people work. EMS typically does peak hour trucks because medical calls fluctuate. For us, at this point, we're just tracking it. We don't believe at this time there are varying amounts of hours through the day or the week that would deter our current schedule. But that's just some data that we look at almost weekly about call demand. One question that we get asked a lot is the demand inside the city limits versus inside the county. So the urban area would be demand inside the city limits of Garner. And you can see in Station 1 was 1,923 calls. Station 3 was 2,049. And that's because those two stations are inside the heart of Garner, and that's generally where their target hazards are. Station 2 and 4 are in more rural areas, so their rural areas inversely reflect on that next bar graph. So Station 2 had 967 rural calls, and Station 4, 781. So that just, if you're curious about how many calls are going into the city limits versus the urban unincorporated area, those two depict that. So for us, total response time is important. We did a survey during our accreditation process and found out that our stakeholders, along with our department and the community, really are estimating in between a 5 and 7 minute response time. From the time that they dial 911 till we arrive, the vision is 7 minutes. So we're trying to track that, and so these individual pieces get us to a total response time. And I just really quick, so from the time that you dial 911 until we're notified is called alarm handling or call processing, meaning you call 911 and they gather your information and then they page us out. Well, that time, by industry standards, is generally a minute and a half or 90 seconds. Wake County's is much longer than that. It's 3.5 minutes last year. So that's something that we are desperately trying to work to decrease that, because by the time we get that call, we're already 3 minutes behind you wanting us to be there in 7. And so we're really working to try to get the dispatch center down to a minute and a half or 90 seconds to process a call for us. So that number needs work. We had set a departmental goal for 90 seconds or a minute and a half to turn out, meaning from the time that we receive the call to the time forward motion of a truck starts. So we start to head to the call. We're shooting for a minute and a half. When we started tracking this data several years ago, we were above 2 minutes. So with our staff working with us, with improving some processes, we actually accomplished our goal last year of a minute and a half to be notified and then to get en route. Travel time for us is longer than what we would like it to be, mainly because of the size of our district. It's an 80 square mile area. If we had just the city limits of Garner at 15 square miles, our travel times would be much less. But because of our broad area, our average travel time, our 90th percentile, is 7.5 minutes. So that's just the first unit. So a medical call for us is a 7.5 minute response time. Then if it's a fire, there are multiple units responding. And so we also capture how long does it take for that entire set of units and people to get there. And that is called ERF, or Effective Response Force, and that is 10.5 minutes. So when you're looking at where are we really at, we're really at about almost an 11 minute total response time for the first unit, and almost 15 to get everybody there 90% of the time. So we certainly got some areas to improve. Call processing and travel times are the two that we really feel like can be improved. So obviously improving processes with call handling, and then travel time, the addition of a Station 5 opening up puts another company in another geographical area, and so we are hoping and adamant that that will decrease our travel times percentages by that station opening up. So when somebody says we'd like you there in 7 minutes, from start to finish, realistically, we're providing that in 11 minutes. So it's something that we really would like to get better at. Call demand by shift. So we have 3 different shifts that rotate. They're really very close together. It just depends on what day they're working, but there's really no outliers there. The next is mutual aid. So when we have a call significant enough that we require help, or when someone else has a call that they require help, we track that. And we give aid. In other words, we go help another department. Last year, we did that 373 times. We required help over twice that amount, 840 times. And the reason is our call demand. So by running 7,000 calls for a mid-sized fire department, we require much more help than what we give. So that's a stat that's been like that for us as long as we've been tracking it. Community activity, so we reached out and provided community involvement to over 6,000 adults and 4,500 children over the last year. Staffing for us is, so we're tracking how many days of the week do we have everybody where they're supposed to be versus a minimum, meaning if anybody else was to mark out sick or be hurt, we would have to take a unit out of service. So we're at optimum staffing last year 37% of the time. We were at minimum staffing 63% of the time. So overwhelmingly, we were at minimum staffing, and that's just based on vacation, sick time, workman's comp, all those things. Top medical dispatches, so we're always asked, what type of medical calls do we run the most of? The top number was unconscious subjects with 215 patients, traffic accidents 143, and then fall injuries 128. And I won't go through all these stats, but this is on scene times for us. So how long are we staying at a call? I know Councilmember Matthews and I had a conversation earlier in the year about medical calls. With EMS being understaffed, the fire department is staying with a patient longer until an EMS unit gets there. And so a medical call for us now is an average of 45 minutes per call, where it used to be less than that. Fire obviously takes longer to mitigate that scene, so that's the longest time frame that we have on any emergency response. Then these are more for our internal staff. They love to see who runs more calls than the other person. So ladder 3, engine 3, last calendar year ran more calls, so they get to brag about that. And then the last is turnout times per unit. And then the last portion of our report is we just kind of put a visual aesthetic to the call stats. So the first map that you see is a heat map of our fire district, and it's showing you the call locations and the hot spots. So where you see the brighter shades of red and orange, those are where our call volume density occurs. Obviously, it is within the heart of Garner, the city limits of Garner, because that's where our population density is. That's where the majority of our commercial property are. So you can see, you'll see like Station 1, you can see that the little red and the writing, and you see the cluster there. And then as you go towards 401 towards Raleigh, that cluster gets larger there. So it's just based on call response and population density. We also depict it a little bit differently using the United States National Grid System. So post 9/11, we all went to a unified incident command system, so everybody talks together. Well, this is a grid system that can be used from department to department, so we want to depict if another agency was looking at us, they could use the grid system to see where our calls are. So again, you can see the density here, and the numbers of inside the grid depict how many calls were inside that certain block of district. And then these are the unit responses. So this is all of our units put on a map. So every unit that went somewhere, this is where they are and the number of units in the little bubbles. And then unit travel time en route, emergency traffic only. So these are emergency responses in this one. And that concludes the data summary of the annual report. So, I'll just close with, this is something that we try to improve on each year. If at any point in time there's information that you've got questions about or you would like to see, we can add things to this report. This is just our takeaway of what we think the public or our stakeholders would want to see. But I'll entertain any questions or comments about any portion of the document.
Okay, thank you, Chief, for a very enlightening report. I have one question, then I'll turn it over to council for questions. from your medical interventions or medical reports, are you able to determine how many of those are related to the drug issue of fentanyl? I hear a lot about that in the news media these days, and the significant problem it is in our society.
Yes, sir. So we do capture that in so our fire reporting information has two sides. One is a public record, so anything fire report wise, a real fire, we can disclose that information. The other is a medical call, so we gather patient information, and in that we determine, is it a drug overdose and what medicines that we use. So we would use Narcan to combat a fentanyl overdose. So we can quantify how many of those we responded to and how many times we administered that medicine. We have the ability to do that based on the medical record side of our RMS system.
Okay. I'll go to council and see what questions they have. I'll start with Mr. Matthews, maybe.
Thanks, Mayor. Two things, Chief Poole. One, I know you're talking about response times and you're at the mercy of the dispatch center out there. Or have they, I know we're doing a lot of hiring as we are as of tonight. In your opinion, or are they at 90% where they need to be, 100%, or is that a moving target?
So I can't address their current staffing levels. I do know they're understaffed and have been. So staffing for a 911 center is an issue. The other issue for this amount of time is it's a philosophical difference. So the fire department emergency response is product driven. So we're trying to produce a product, right? So we're trying to get there as fast as we can and deal with that. 911 center is process driven. So their model is a process, and you have to do all these steps to move to the next phase. And that process is what takes time. You have to gather who they are, what the problem is, and answer all these questions to determine, does police, fire, EMS, who gets to go on that call. So staffing is one, the process is another. What we've tried to do is to get them to do what's called rapid response. So if you call and say, my house is on fire, well, I don't care what your name is, what your age is, or anything. You hit a button so we can start going there because it takes time. While we're going, then process this information and send it to us because we have live data terminals on the trucks. So any information that a dispatcher has can automatically be pushed to these units. So what we're trying to get the culture to do is, rather than gather all this information and then send us, get us going and send it to us on the way. And we're hoping things like that will decrease this number.
Gotcha.
Those are the two issues that I see in the 911 system: staffing and process.
And the other item you shared with me, some of the board members might know, now you alluded to it a while ago, that when you go on a medical call, that once the first responders are there, they cannot leave until relieved by EMS, and that EMS could be 30 minutes out or longer.
Yeah, and EMS is in the same predicament. So they're trying to increase their staffing. They're building new stations and these things, but their call demand has increased as well. Obviously, if our call demand's going up, theirs is going up exponentially. So their call demand is rising. Their staffing is low as well. And so, yes, ambulances are having to travel a further distance because they were already out on a call or coming from somewhere else. And so that increases that time.
And which means you have to have assistance from other stations when that puts you at a low position at your station.
Yeah, so what that affects for us is called reliability. So looking at how reliable a unit is to be able to run a call in its district. So Engine 1, how reliable is it that when 911 it gives a call, it can run it? And the longer it is out on another unit, another call, the least reliable it is to be able to run the next call. And so somebody else has to run that call. And so for us, reliability is the concern there.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Mr. Singleton, anything?
Yes, Chief, thank you for the information. Interesting numbers, especially the dramatic increase in number of calls. That's You know, I remember when your call volume, it just seems like it was just a couple of years ago was about half that.
Yes, sir.
So it's increased quite a bit. Also can say that from personal experience here in the last couple of weeks, had to make a medical call for my mom, and Garner Fire got there first, and I was able to assess the situation, and then she was transported. The EMS got there and transported to the hospital, and everything is okay. It's just part of the going through the dementia Alzheimer process. But anyway, they responded quickly and promptly as I knew they would. So
Thank you.
a thumbs up. And thank you.
Okay, Ms. Behringer?
I've had the privilege of seeing this report before at the board meeting, but it's always enlightening as far as reminding us that the firemen do a whole lot more than jump on the fire truck and go to a fire. There's so many more aspects of their job than what we see or what pops up in our mind's eye when that fire siren goes off. So I'd just like to remind the public that there's many, many more things that they can attribute to the firemen for keeping them safe.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Dellinger?
Thank you, Chief Poole. Always really good information. Had some questions looking at the data and didn't know if I don't put you on the spot, but
Oh, that's okay.
there are a couple of kind of hot spots in the data that I wonder if you could kind of shed some light on. The first one was the call density, that 401-70 split, and also I guess that there's another near it, I guess it's in-town suites. I guess on 401-70, that's a lot of accident activity there, and then the in-town is more medical-related calls. Is that correct?
Yeah, so if you're looking at that general area, there's a lot of commercial property in that area. There's a larger transient population in that area, so it's not just in-town suites. There is several motels in that area that sometimes we have, medical calls at and things. And that I gave in a report last year. The in-town suites is our number one location for overdoses, right? So, but it's not all that, but that is attributed to that is the type of property that is in that general area, the transit population, and then those motels certainly drive up the call volume in that area.
The other was the number of call counts. I think it's at Aversboro and Timber. And is that a lot of just traffic accidents happening at that intersection? Is that what that is?
Yeah, I would attribute that to accidents.
Has there been any conversations about improvements to that intersection? I know the problem is the intersection itself, but also the side streets that come off from Lowe's and Aldi. And I know I've seen probably in the past year 3 different accidents, driving by there. Are there conversations with the town and police about maybe, or DOT, maybe to see what we can do? Because it seems to be pretty dangerous.
I've not had any conversations regarding accidents. I know the police chief's here. I'll put her on the spot real quick. But yes, it's something, we'd be glad to have a conversation about. It would be interesting to pull real data about multiple years out to see if this is an outlier year, right? Or is this a trend? And we certainly have the ability to do that. So offline, I'd be glad to meet with Chief Smith and we can look at it to see, is it an outlier year or is this something that is regular?
That'd be good, because I know, I've seen several myself, and it seems to jump out of the page in terms of your call response. And I don't know what the overlap with the police department is, but I'm sure they respond to the same calls. Another was kind of a cluster of activity at East Timber. I guess there's a lot of commercial out there as well. But I wonder if there's also a clustering of accidents at White Oak and Timber.
Yep, so traffic accidents near White Oak Road, 70, even I-40, that general area, there's a large amount of our traffic accidents. And then also it's a commercial area, so you've got commercial fire alarms, that commercial property that creates call volume as well. You've also got multifamily there, right? So you have an exorbitant amount of multifamily apartments concentrated in that area, which your medical calls would increase as well. We typically don't have a large fire volume there because they're sprinkler, but population density equates medical calls.
And kind of dovetailing with that is on the response time, or not response time, travel unit time. That's different than response time. The travel time to those areas seems to be a little bit longer than in the heart. and also looking at the area around New Bethel, Clifford, all this area bound in there, there seems to be a marked difference in the travel time down there, and it's bottlenecked by White Oak and 50. And I'm kind of wondering what your feedback is on anything that can be done in the short term, because there's high school down there, elementary school, and then how many thousands of residences are going in. Any thoughts on that?
So we've identified in our strategic plan the need for a fire location study to be done by a third party to help identify this. But from my experience, you will need a fire station in that area because it's based on A, the growth and development that is going out there, which would increase call volume, but B, our travel time. So the closest fire station so at some point is Station 3, which is at Timber and Vandora, or Station 1, and they're the two busiest stations that we already have. So their reliability is lower and they have a longer travel distance to that area. So it is my belief that if a fire station location study is done, it will identify the need for a station to be built in that general area based on those parameters.
Would it have to be a full fire station, or is there a model for like
So
smaller neighborhood
Yeah,
community fire
it's called a
rescue?
substation. So it would be a one unit, no supervisor, just basically an engine company to operate in that area would typically be what would be recommended in that, I would think. Yeah.
Thank you all.
Mr. Vance?
Yes, Chief Poole, very good and detailed report. I appreciate the information. And just one point I would like to get clarification on. I want to say last year there was a discussion about in-town suites and the situation going on there relative to the overdoses. Has there been an increase or decrease in this year?
I don't have that information in front of me. I can certainly get it to you in comparison between the 2 years. I didn't bring anything that was specific to overdoses tonight, but I can get you that information. I do know PD was requesting some information from in-town on a project that we were looking at together this week. I don't know if Chief Hathcock and Officer Adams maybe. So they were looking at something specific to that facility this week. But I can get you what you would like to know is amount of overdoses last calendar year versus this one.
Yes.
I can provide you that.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for the hard work and everything you do. That's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Mayor, could I-
Yeah, I'll go back around.
Chief Poole, on Thompson Road, the new emergency operations center that the county's putting in there, is that going to be will that take any of the ambulances or the EMS vehicles out of our station and put them in there, or it's just a lateral move, or is that going to be more vehicles in our area?
So the last plan, we have a unit, an ambulance that is housed out of our Station 3, which is just down the block. They will leave Station 3 and move into that building.
Okay.
So to my knowledge, it wasn't to add an additional unit, but relocate that unit. And then that building was going to be a logistics hub for Wake County EMS as well. But to my knowledge, the unit from Station 3 would just relocate to that building.
Okay, thank you.
Go right ahead, yeah.
Just a quick question on, what kind of recruitment and retention success and challenges you're seeing?
So we will have to hire 5 positions sometime July and August timeframe. So the goal is to advertise in late May, early June, to hire those 5 backfill positions, to have them start in August so they can enter our TR school. So we have a recruit academy that's graduating in June, but when they graduate, they have to take North Carolina Technical Rescuer. So we're a high-level rescue department, and that's a unique training that the academy doesn't have. So when those recruits get done with the academy, we will train them, which is a 6 or 8 week program. My goal is to have those 5 FTEs filled so they would go into that school at that same time. So I have 5 positions that will need to backfill, and my goal is to have them filled by August. Yes, sir.
This may be a curiosity question, Chief, but when it's determined that assistance is needed from another department, I guess, say for instance here, is there some kind of a rotational schedule, or is it just the first one that's closest by, or the one that is available to assist? How does that work?
It's closest unit. So all of the units have GPS on there. So when we're out, whatever is the next closest unit gets dispatched to that call. So what you'll have is, and this is a new process for the fire service over the last couple of years, and which is really good because you don't have to think about it. It just knows that to send Fairview or Fuquay, whoever's closer responds. But what can happen also is, and it's happened to us, so we give mutual aid. So let's say we take a call at Swift Creek, and we're on that call. When we clear that call, where Raleigh gets a call and we're closer. So then all of a sudden this unit shifts towards Raleigh, and then it's 2 hours later trying to get back to our district. That happens. There's more pluses than minuses for this process, but it does come with some challenges. The further you get away, you can get, pieced out to other places. So,
Yeah.
But it's a GPS closest station, closest unit response is how that picks it up.
Okay, thank you. Council, any other questions for Mr. Poole? Okay, well, as usual, we thank you for taking time to come in and share this information with you, and thank you for the good work that your department does. It's an integral part of our town's safety process, and I know you do a lot of public relations things to keep the public informed of what's going on. And Mr. Johnson, I guess I should recognize him. Is it next Saturday or the Saturday after? I've got it in my calendar. There's going to be a special day here in our town relating to the importance of citizens having fire alarms put in their homes, and he's going to lead an effort that actually will send volunteers out into the community and have some installers. I hope to be a part of that. And
Yes,
so,
sir. Yeah, we're partnering with Red Cross for that, and
Yeah.
it'll be the largest smoke detector canvas that we've done to date. So information's on our town website as well as our fire department site as well. So thank you
very good. Yeah,
for mentioning it.
we'll let
Yes,
the
sir.
public know about that. Okay. Anything
Thank you.
else, anybody? Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Okay. That's the only presentation I show on my agenda, so we will go now into the item of discussion and reports. The first item there is we have a representative from the NCHIP who will provide information. Was anybody on staff introducing this person, or? Well, yeah, there you are.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Good
Our
evening.
HR director.
Yeah, Miss Lewis.
Yes.
Sabrina Lewis. Yep.
Good evening.
Oh, I'm sorry. McDonald. Oops.
It's okay. I make the same mistake myself pretty frequently. Thank you. Good evening, members of council. We are still receiving a variety of feedback from our workforce as to things that we can do to continue to engage them and retain them here in the town. And so one of the more specific and frequent pieces of feedback that we've been receiving is related to our health insurance benefits, particularly dependent care coverage and its affordability, as well as having a broader network of providers. And so we began to look at ways that we could explore options to address those issues, along with our current carrier estimating a nearly 6% renewal. We wanted to explore some opportunities to address some of those issues, as well as try to maintain the costs for our coverage for this coming year. And that led us to consider the North Carolina Health Insurance Pool. I know that some of you have heard of it before. We've looked at it a few years ago, and so they've had some time, they've grown, and it has been presented to us again as an opportunity. And I think that this will provide some solutions and answers to address some of those issues that we've been receiving in feedback from our workforce. So tonight we are going to hear from Wes Grigston. He is the lead consultant for the North Carolina Health Insurance Pool, which is managed by Gallagher. And we are looking for some guidance to to move forward with this as an option for our coverage for the coming year. This would only be for insurance, health insurance benefits, all of our other benefits, dental, vision, all of our other supplementals would continue to be managed by our current broker, IBA, with our current carriers. Okay, so with that, I'll turn it over to Wes.
Thank you very much, and good evening, sir. Thank you.
Does this clicker here advance? Perfect. All right. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members, town management. Thank you for having me. And Sabrina, thanks for that introduction. As Sabrina said, my name is Wes Grixton, and I'm with Gallagher Benefit Services. We're based out of Charlotte, North Carolina. And I'm here this evening to talk about the North Carolina health insurance pool and how it can help stabilize the cost of health insurance that the town is spending on your employees. Is it just a simple click here, down button? There we go. All right, so I want to spend a few minutes talking about what is the North Carolina health insurance pool, how it all came to be. I want to dive a little bit deeper and educate you all on the model itself and how it is actually stabilizing cost by sharing risks together with other cities, towns, and counties throughout the state. And then I want to dive into the numbers specific to the town of Gardner. And so we've already done the analysis with the town's leadership team, and we've already presented that analysis to the NCHIP Board of Trustees, and they have approved the town's membership in NCHIP pending your approval. And then I'll highlight next steps and open it up to your questions. Before I jump into the details about NCHIP, if you're not familiar with Gallagher, we are the firm that launched NCHIP. We've been around since 1927. We have 39,000 employees around the world. But what's important to me is my team right here in North Carolina. I lead a team of public sector experts. We're all based out of Charlotte, and we're backed by a slew of subject matter experts on the right-hand side, from technology to pharmacy to compliance to well-being to property and casualty consultants as well. So it's far from just a one-man show. We have a whole entire team that supports and advises on the North Carolina health insurance pool. This is all we do. So we do consider ourselves thought leaders in the North Carolina local government space. When we started down this path back in 2017, we had 7 local government clients. And fast forward to today, we have just at 27 and should be close to 30 by July 1. So to Sabrina's point, we identified a need in the marketplace. We've steadily grown our membership year over year over year. And I'll get into some numbers as to what has led that growth. So NCHIP is simply an agreement between counties and cities and towns. It's regulated by the North Carolina Department of Insurance. We have legal counsel Pointer Sproul that takes lead on that piece. It's driven by our members. So we do ask that each one of our local governments appoint a primary and a secondary delegate to sit on our board. It's a financial vehicle, so think about it as a way for the town to share risk and to stabilize cost of high-cost claims. And I'll get into a little bit more detail about that. One thing that our members do like is the fact that you can preserve your plan design. And so here at the town, you offer 2 plans. Each plan has their own deductible, out-of-pocket maximums, and copays. So you're able to maintain flexibility and autonomy of what you want those to be. It's my team's job to be able to design a plan that fits the needs of the town of Gardner, and we review that on a quarterly, annually basis to make sure that we're in line with the needs. It's conservatively funded and reserved, meaning that we have a team of underwriters that look at historical data to project future cost, and we do so in a way that's going to set you up for financial success in the long term. And that's really important to the success of this model. I'll talk a little bit about the public sector vendors that we've partnered with. I love the fact that it's fully transparent, meaning you have access to all the data inside of NCHIP, so you can help make informed decisions around claims that are happening here at the town and develop programs around that. And then it's stable budgetable, and predictable. So you'll see that our average 5-year trend has been a 2% increase. Compare that to market trend at 7 to 8%. We're outpacing market trends significantly. But what finance directors love to see is it's stable from year to year to year. You'll see here that we established July 1 in 2018. I mentioned that we launched with our Pioneer 7 members, and we've since grown to 27. We're open to North Carolina cities, towns, and counties that have at least 75 or more employees on your plan. So there's a significant amount of small towns and cities in North Carolina. This really isn't designed to be a solution for the small local government unit. It's really mid-sized to large. It's open to 1-year membership terms, and so if you feel that there's a better solution back in the commercial marketplace, there's no penalty to exit NCHIP, although we've never had anybody exit NCHIP since our beginning. New members are admitted by the recommendation of NCHIP's Board of Trustees. It's not Gallagher. It's our job to do a risk analysis and present that to our board, but it's our board's job to approve a new prospective member. And I'll talk a little bit more detail about our board. We're in our 5th year of operation. July 1st, we'll be moving into our 6th year. I mentioned 27 governments, just shy of 10,000 employees covered on the plan today if you add up all the employees, and then 14,000 total covered members if you include their spouses and their children. So what's important is when we're negotiating contracts on behalf of our 27 local governments, we do so as a single entity, a 14,000 life entity. So we have an extreme amount of buying power and leverage when we're negotiating these administration and pharmacy contracts with Blue Cross. And what's important to you all is that results in low renewals, okay? This is the most common question that I get, is tell me a little bit about who's in. So on the left-hand side, you'll see our Pioneer 7. These were the original members that started NCHIP back in 2018. Hillsborough, Catawba County, Allegheny County, Orange County, the town of Morrisville, Brunswick County, and the town of Wake Forest. That group averaged a 1.3% renewal in their first year, which attracted 4 new members in 2019. From the city of Oxford, Caswell County, Kernersville, and Macon County. 2020, we added Warren County, Alexander County, and Duplin County. 2021, 6 entities joined from Thomasville all the way down to our first council of government, which is Piedmont Triad Regional Council. And then last year, Morehead City, Swain County, City of Graham, Holly Springs, and Wilson County. I share these numbers with you just to show the steady growth of NCHIP year over year over year. I'll also share that other members have applied to NCHIP, but they were not approved by the NCHIP Board of Trustees based off of their risk profile. And that's really important to our current membership because we want to protect our core membership. And so if there's a risk profile that's above our average, then it's very likely that we'll wait 12 months and review them again down the road until their claims normalize. But as we continue to grow, so does our buying power. I mentioned that the leverage that we have to negotiate really strong contracts with Blue Cross and our pharmacy rebates coming back are significant. And so we're just north of $100 million total plan. We'll be at about $120 million in total July 1 of 2023. But the important thing is the buying power that growth brings. You'll see that this is a solution for counties and local governments all the way from the mountains to the coast. And it was very intentional back in 2018 when we partnered with Blue Cross and Blue Shield of North Carolina. They do have the most robust network of providers across the state, and they are the carrier that has the deepest discounts in the entire state. And so we've successfully been able to partner with governments across the state. Speaking of Blue Cross, they have a significant footprint in the public sector space. They have over 600 customers representing north of 600,000 members. And to dig into a little bit more details about the model itself, we know that high cost claims are not predictable from year to year. And so as a risk manager, when you look at a high cost claim report, define that as claims over $40,000. The things that you might see are specialty medications. You'll see cancers, heart attacks, you'll see strokes, you'll see premature children, catastrophic accidents. Those are the things that are very tough to predict year over year over year. And on a standalone basis, that's what keeps finance directors and your renewals a little bit off guard, because you can't really predict what's going to happen into the future. But if we can share that risk with our member partners and everybody pays the exact same per member per month cost and all claims over $40,000, then we can stabilize that cost. And so another way to think about this is there's no claim over $40,000 that will disproportionately impact any one of our NCHIP members. All right. And so if you have a $500,000 or $1 million claim in fiscal year 24, as a member of NCHIP, that's okay, because at $40,000, you start sharing that risk with all of your member partners. Another way to look at that is this chart right here. The red bars signify an individual local government. You can see on the left-hand side that member averaged $161 per member per month. On the far right, that member's having a really good year. They're averaging $17 per member per month. But as a member of NCHIP, they agree that we're going to pay the exact same amount, the blue bar. So some folks are being brought up to the average, some folks are being brought down to the average, and they know that one year they may be subsidized, the other year they may be subsidizing, but over the long term, you're going to win and you're going to be averaging the NCHIP averages of 2%. So this is just a visual to show that as a member of NCHIP, everybody is paying the exact per member per month cost in your high cost claims. And that's claims over $40,000. Here's another visual that we're super proud of. You know, this is what we set out to do day one, and that was to outpace market trend. I mentioned at the top of the presentation, trend is about 7 to 8% year over year. You can see our first year, there's our 7 in fiscal year 19, average of 1.3%. Fiscal year 20, the 11 averaged of 1.8. Fiscal year 21, claims were suppressed because of the pandemic. A lot of folks weren't going to see the doctor, and so we saw that in the numbers. So 0.5% increase was the average, but we definitely saw a rebound in fiscal year 22 and fiscal year 23. Those that had previously put off elective procedures were now going back to get those. So 3% average in 22, 3.5 in 23, average that out over 5 years and 2%. And so this is what our membership is proud of. This is what groups like the town of Garner want to hear about. They love to see that we're outpacing market trend year over year over year. I mentioned 100% member retention. So once members join NCHIP, they see the stability. They see the benefits of working with their peers across the state. They see the average renewals. And they also see the reserves. So I mentioned $17 million is the amount that we have in our bank. We need about 6 to 7 million. So we have about 2.5 times what we need, which is a really good position for us to be in. And so now our board is in conversations with other entities about returning some of those surpluses. So that money is tied to our individual entities versus being tied to the insurance carrier. This is a quick visual of our board at work. You'll see the local governments listed on the left-hand side, the delegates, primary and secondary. You'll see it's mostly made up of town and county managers, benefit managers, HR directors, finance directors. What I love is the diversity in the positions. And so when we're talking about topics important to our board, there's multiple different perspectives and opinions that weigh in on each decision that's made. We meet once a month virtually. It's the third Wednesday of every month. And then in November, we come together for our in-person meeting. And another visual for you. But it's just an opportunity for our groups to work together, to hear from our key stakeholders at Blue Cross, to hear from our key stakeholders at Prime, which is our pharmacy benefit manager, our technology folks, and also to build relationships and really just to make each other better and grow even outside of your employee benefits programs. All right, so specific to the town of Garner, I want to get into the numbers. We've already gone through this process, which is why we have green check marks. So first step is we've requested data. And when we look at data, we look at 24 months of claims that have already happened. And so that'll give us a good idea of what we think will happen in the future. We put together a risk profile and there in the middle, and it's a 2-page summary of all that data that we then present to our board. That'll tell us if a prospective member's profile is on par or better than our current membership, which gives our board an indication whether or not we should approve or deny in the future. So we had a conversation with our board 2 weeks ago, specific to the town of Gardner and one other group, and the board did unanimously vote to approve membership for the town of Gardner. And now it's back to you all whether or not you would accept the invitation to join. So that was just an important part of the process. Our board certainly wants to take a look at that before you all accept the invitation. It's an important part of the way that we're able to manage the risk into the future, is making sure that we're letting in the right risk. Specific to the numbers, we know we have 2 plans. We mirror your plans exactly the way they are today in terms of your deductible, your out-of-pocket maximums, your co-insurance levels, and your co-pays. And we price that out. $2.65 million is roughly what you pay today to Aetna for those 2 programs. Inside of NCHIP, that would go down by about 1.7% for the exact same plans. $2.6 million would be the cost in NCHIP. Once you're in NCHIP, your projected renewal goes back to what we've experienced in the past. It would be an average of 2% year over year over year. The big difference is not only do you stabilize your year over year renewals, but you also build reserves. So let's give a hypothetical example with Aetna today. $2.6 million is what you're going to pay for them, whether or not you have a really bad year or whether or not you have a really good year. Let's say you have a really good year and they reimburse $1.5 million in claims, but you've paid them $2.6 million. There's a difference there of about $1.1 million that goes in the pocket of Aetna versus staying with the town. Inside of NCHIP, it stays with the town versus going to your carrier. So that's a significant difference in the NCHIP model versus the model that you're in today. This is just a hypothetical 5-year funding based off of NCHIP's history. There in the green box shows that $2.6 million extrapolated out over a 5-year span, 2% year over year. You'll see $13.5 million is that spend in aggregate. If on a standalone basis, town of Gardner averages a trend increase at 7%, the spend would be about $15.2 million. So just a simple exercise to show the value of being able to maintain a lower renewal over time would represent significant savings, in this example, close to $1.7 million to the town. So with that, the NCHIP board has already approved. We wanted to share that information with you and open it up to questions. Our timeline here, we're in a position now to open it up to questions. If you guys do accept NCHIP's invitation to join, I'd work directly with the staff on implementation with the Blue Cross team, setting up open enrollment and communication strategies for the employees, and we would continue with the next steps. So with that, I will open it up to questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Had a chance to review this a little bit before the meeting, and your comments helped to understand some elements of it, sure enough, so thank you. I'll start with Ms. Behringer, see if she has questions for you.
No, not this time.
Okay, Mr. Singleton, anything?
I have several. I'll do one at a time. Your average for 5 years is 2%, but the last 2 years it's averaged 3.25%.
Mm-hmm.
As you've gotten bigger, the increase has grown. So your projection is still lower than the last 2 years. Why do we attribute the last 2 years to going up so much?
Yeah, I think the last year, well, really the past 2 years, again, I attribute it to the COVID rebound. And so we had a depressed renewal in fiscal year 21, which was 0.5. And then you saw a little inflated 3% in fiscal year 22 and 3.5 in fiscal year 23. So first is COVID rebound. Then secondly, when I'm meeting with my underwriting team, we're also looking at the macroeconomic environment. And right now, the number one word you hear in the headlines is inflation. And so knowing that the provider contracts with carriers. They're up for renewal every 3 years. We want to be conservative in our numbers and making sure that we're funding enough to account for any type of, call it, increases in those provider contracts due to inflation. So it's really pandemic, rebound, inflation would be the two things that are driving that.
Okay, I got others, but I'll let other people
Okay.
ask first.
Good, all right. I'll go to Mr. Vance on my right, if he has anything.
No questions at this time?
Okay, Mr. Matthews?
Nothing at this time.
Okay, Mr. Dellinger?
I don't know if it's a question for you or for staff. In changing providers, have we run sort of the model of shifting over and what kind of impacts it would have on access to providers for employees and how disruptive that may or may not be, so that we know what the real impacts are on staff?
So right now, we have a limited network of providers. If you remember, there's a cost associated with the Duke and Wake Med providers as opposed to UNC. This would provide us with an open network where we would not be limited to the types of providers or the providers that we want to see. So that would include UNC Rex and whatever other providers would be necessary. As it relates to changing over, that's where we would be working with INSHIP to come up with a plan for open enrollment. So we would be working to provide them with the necessary information so that we could get our benefit guides and all of the things that are necessary to get out to the employees so they can make their selections, and we would still be on schedule for July 1st.
No one would have to change their provider. It actually broadens it versus narrowing it in any way for anyone. Okay,
Yes,
that was my
that's
question.
correct.
Thank you.
So, in terms of the organization, I guess it's your goal to continue growing your clients, so to speak, or the people that, the towns and entities that are invited in. Has anybody set a goal in terms of that, or how does that progress from year to year?
That's a great question, and I think I can speak for the INSHIP board here. When their goal is to look for those that are interested in their aligned interests, and that's to stabilize the cost of health insurance for town, city, and county employees. And so, in terms of a number, there's not a set number of where they want to be. What we've done over the past 4 or 5 years is 3 to 6 new local governments each and every year. We're not looking to grow by more than that each and every year. We think steady, consistent growth, but maintaining our foundational principles and making sure that we're bringing in the right risk. And so there are some entities out there where we know we have large known high claimants that may not be a good fit for us this year. And so that's the type of conversation where we might wait 12 months, 24 months until those claims normalize a little bit. But I think the board's goal is really just to stick to our principles, and it's making sure that we're partnering with the right folks.
So does your board basically take its oversight from the insurance commissioner, or what is your relation to the state insurance guy?
Yep. And so our obligation is to notify the Department of Insurance when a new member comes on board. And so, but our board of trustees, they're the ones that oversee INSHIP organization.
Okay. All right. I'll go back around. Phil, you have anything?
So just for myself and say the average employee with the town here, are we saying this is going to be an additional to Aetna to allow another package, or it could be a third package to look at? It might meet their particular situation better than maybe the Aetna package. It might be more, the cost could be less on the family plan versus maybe the Aetna plan by going this route.
Yeah, good question. Yeah, so these plans would be offered in place of the Aetna plans.
In place of? Okay.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah, Blue Cross Blue Shield would be our carrier. instead of Aetna.
Okay, that's what I was
But
trying to find.
what this does is offer us more flexibility to design our plan, more customize it for our needs. So we're able to open it up, the network up from the ACO that we have with Aetna that it doesn't limit, but you get better premiums if you go to Duke or Wake Med. And so this will broaden it where employees can go to other providers like UNC or Rex, like Ms. McDonald was saying. So.
Yeah, Ms. McDonald brought up a good point at the top of her comment. She talked about stabilizing the cost and reinvesting in dependents. And we've seen a lot of our local governments starting to do that. So now their plan is actually working for them. It's enabling them to stabilize their costs, grow reserves, and now they're reducing the cost of that spouse and children and family coverage. So we're certainly seeing that. And I hear the comments by the fire chief talking about attracting and retaining. It all works together. So if we're able to stabilize cost here and offer a good plan where spouses and children and family can afford coverage, it's going to really help out with the attraction efforts as well.
Okay, Ms. Barrington.
How will the current climate between the state of North Carolina and Blue Cross affect your proposal, or will it?
The short answer is it won't. If you look at the state health plan, it's really catered toward K through 12 community college. There are a small amount, 5% or less, that are counties and small local government units. It would potentially open up the opportunity for them to look at NCHIP in the future, but NCHIP is not open to K through 12 and community colleges, which is the majority of the state health plan. But we are keeping an eye on what's happening at the state level in the event that the 5% that I mentioned become eligible for our program.
Yeah, just a question on, explain the structures and the entities and their relationship. There's InShip, and then there's Gallagher. And I guess that InShip organization, is that set up as a nonprofit, and then you all are hired as consultants?
Yep.
How does that relationship work?
Great question. And so there's one slide in here I wish I put in there, but it's the InShip board, that sits at the top. So they are the board of trustees, and they decide to partner with operational partners, Gallagher being one of those. And so we are the advisor and the benefits consultant to NCHIP and to the individual entities inside of NCHIP. Another operational partner is McMillan Pate. They're our accounting firm. Cherry Becker is our auditor. And then Pointer Spruill is our legal counsel. Under that, you have Blue Cross is our network and our claims payer. I mentioned Prime. They're our pharmacy benefit manager. They're aligned with Blue Cross. And then we also have a benefit administration system that helps HR teams maintain accurate eligibility from week to week, month to month. We also invoice off of that system. But it all starts with the NCHIP board at the top. They decide who to partner with, and we take their lead.
How are the administrative costs covered? Is it incentivized in a way that the costs are kept down? Like, good job, we'll give you a little more money because you saved us more money.
Yeah.
Explain the administrative fee structure.
Yep. And so I shared with you that $2.65 million. And so about 1.5 to 2% of that total spend goes to NCHIP operations. All right. And so inside of that is Gallagher's agreement, our accountant's agreement, our auditor's agreement, our legal counsel's agreement. But it makes up about 1.5 to 2% of total cost, which is already accounted for in that $2.65 million that I proposed.
Thank you.
How's the board of trustees are made up of people from all the various towns, right?
Yes, sir.
Is that a structure where they serve certain terms and then that position turns over, or is it up to the town to decide how they want to select or elect their representative?
Good question. And so there is a executive committee as a part of the board, which is the chair, the vice chair, the treasurer, and the secretary. Each one of those positions, they serve a 2-year term, and they have the option for a second 2-year term consecutively. And then after that, they rotate. All the other positions outside of the executive committee, there's no set term. And so if there is a change at the town, city, or county, and they want to amend their trustees, they can do so at any time.
Questions, man?
Go ahead.
This probably might be for the staff. For the average family out there, town employee, whether it's a policeman or somebody at Public Works or wherever, and they got a family plan. And it could be any type, might be the spouse and one child, whatever. Have we done any actual comparisons to where we're at now versus if we switch over, are we going to see a savings per, is there a dollar and cent savings by making the switch is what we're saying here?
Yeah, they got a chart showing it.
Yeah.
So we don't have that information right now, just because really it was due to the plan design. So typically what happens in the very beginning is that the first plan that we have closely mirrors the plan that we are coming from. So the two plans that we have with kind of a plan with Aetna and then sort of a more robust plan, our traditional plan and the choice plan, we would have two plans with Blue Cross Blue Shield that closely mirror that. And then as we gain reserves, as we begin to look, and so we would be able to make sure that the cost remain comparable to what we had with Aetna. And so as we gain reserves over the years, then we would have ways to apply those that extra funding to drive down the cost of dependent care. So while we may not see dramatic decreases in premiums in this coming year, over time, we would have opportunities to make that a more cost-effective plan.
Ms. McDonald, I think you maybe said this before, but this plan has been, shall I say, vetted with our full-time employees in terms of their interest in and willingness to see the town make a change?
So we have not polled the workforce. What we have done, though, is as part of our assessment process, we've looked at all of the other plans that are of all the other cities, towns, and counties that are participants of INSHIP, and we've compared them to what we currently have. And significantly, with every plan that we've looked at, the cost has been it's been better than what we currently have.
Okay. Mr. Singleton, you have a question?
I just want to get back on this, getting back into open up the carrier so that UNC healthcare will be allowed also. So as it is now, they're out of network, and I know from personal experience, because when my wife got diagnosed with cancer, got recommended to go there. She loved her doctor, loved her surgeon. We stayed there, paid a lot out of pocket for the deductible. So what we're saying is, in this proposal, the deductibles will be the same. Whether it's UNC, they're all going to be the same. It's going to be the lower one, not the higher one.
That's correct.
Okay, I just want to clear up, just want to make sure, because the deductible, and in the choice plan, the deductible is higher, but the initial cost is much lower. That's why that was added as an option. So in designing this, everyone will have, as you said, you'll expand the network, and people will be able to go to one of the three big hospital medical organizations here in the Triangle.
That's correct.
And it'll all even out.
That's correct.
Okay, so that's at least for those who prefer or who are aligned with UNC Healthcare and have been, there'll be a benefit to the town and to the employee.
Yes, we have heard from many employees that they've either come into the town with all UNC providers, and now they've either, are faced with having to switch all of their providers or pay a higher cost. And so this is a way to address that.
That's good. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I want to clarify that.
Any questions, comments here?
Yeah, Phil's question. So, if we go with it, when we start, it'll mirror basically what we have. So my question is sort of over time, how much flexibility does the town have in shaping what it needs, and like how much variability is there amongst the membership in terms of what they're able to offer to their employees. Does that question make sense?
Yeah, are you talking like flexibility in plan design?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, the good news is, and this was kind of set forth by our Pioneer 7 from day one, is they wanted control over their plan. You know, they wanted to, what worked for Brunswick County was very different for what worked, you know, for Orange County, Catawba County, et cetera. So you guys have complete plan design flexibility. You know, we know several cities that, you know, they're doing very well, and so year over year they'll reduce their deductible by $250 or $500. So limiting and lessening the out-of-pocket exposure for their employees. And come open enrollment season, that's a good message to spread, you know, to employees, and it's always well received. So the important thing is the town has full flexibility over your plan design moving into NCHIP and into the future.
Mr. Vance, anything else?
No questions? No.
Okay, down here. So to use a term, and I know you had an onboarding timeline there, at this juncture, the ball is in our court. Is that a fair way to make the analogy?
I just thought
Okay,
of,
go
had
ahead.
been asked, as regards to prescription plan, it'd be similar or the same as what we currently have.
Correct, yeah. So Prime is one of the largest PBMs, pharmacy benefit managers in the country, and that's who Blue Cross aligns themselves with. And so when you look at all of our 27 members, we're all aligned with the same PBM, Prime. And so they have a comprehensive list of drugs covered, and you guys would have access to that.
Okay, all right, thank you.
So again, just back to my point, if I'm understanding correctly, NCHIP has done what it needs to do to make the offer available to the town, and it's up to the town whether or not to accept your offer.
Right.
Okay.
And Mayor, if I could interject here, what we were hoping from the council tonight is if this is something that the council feels like we should pursue for FY24, to give us concurrence to do that. What that allows is our HR team to start working with NCHIP on developing the materials and information, because we do have to do open enrollment in May and get that process started. So that would happen on the staff side. What we would bring back to the council is a copy of an interlocal agreement to be approved as sort of the final piece of joining the pool. But tonight we wanted to make sure you had an opportunity to learn more about the opportunity and the plan, but also if this is something that the council would want us to pursue, we ask for your concurrence to move forward so that we can start that process for open enrollment.
Okay, and without pushing the button too much, so I guess if all the pieces come together the way we'd anticipate, this would be effective in the new fiscal year?
It's July 1st. That's what we're working towards, a July 1 implementation.
That's what I thought, okay. All right, anybody else have questions for this gentleman?
I'd like maybe not tonight, I mean, a little more time for other questions to come and get answered, because it's a lot of information, and I know I'll end up with questions. So I'm kind of, it's a big decision to, like, say, go forward, and, you know, so I don't know, seems kind of sudden to me.
Yeah, it probably does. This may be your first time going through this, but the time frame is pretty much the same as whenever any other time we've made a change to our carrier. So it is pretty much the same type of time period. And we've been looking at this for a while, pretty much kind of looking at it every year for the last few years. But I understand, you know, we don't want to rush you or whatever.
What's different than anything we've been presented to us before, we did the, you know, self-funded we looked at, and we looked at renewing the plans and looking at two different carriers. This is a little bit different. And
yes, since you've been on the board, we have looked at this one other time. But since you've been on the board.
The first year, we looked at it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been considered other times, other places.
I'll ask my question. So what is the potential impact on the fire merger and their benefits, and then onboarding in some future time frame, and impact on cost? And I was going to ask the question later, but.
Oh, no. I mean, I think the best thing about this is it gives us options. What we've heard over the years from our employees, and even when we did the analysis of the fire department merger and what that would look like, the dependent care was a big concern, the cost of our insurance versus what the fire department has now. So we looked at self-funded, and that did not work for us because of the risk we would have with the number of employees we have. So we kind of see this as the best of both worlds, where we would be in a bigger pool, and we have more flexibility to control some of the costs a little bit better, because with the savings, we would put those in a reserve, and we would be able to kind of buy down some of the costs of the dependent care or any other parts of our plan we wanted to. So we think this, in the long term, would be a better solution for a fire merger and for our own employees, as far as seeing that dependent care and other costs go down.
And the immediate impact would be opening up the network to any provider. And we see that as the immediate benefit that we hear from not only employees, but also it's something from the fire department when we did the benefits analysis, having open access to especially the UNC providers as well.
Is that the consensus of the merger committee and the fire board as well?
I would say, well, you want to comment? I would think so. I mean, we've had discussions, and I think the general idea was that through the merger, the fire department should not suffer any detrimental additional costs or suffer from any different coverage. But that's a general statement. I don't know if you want to.
Well, the only thing I'd say is
Manager.
we don't have a definite plan or date on when that may happen, so I think we need to look at our current employees and try to do something that will help them right now. And I certainly think this is a better option for a fire merger than the insurance we have currently, so I think it'd be a better situation.
Adding the fire department personnel would most likely improve our risk profile because they're generally healthy with low-cost claims.
We have one example, a precedent that's occurred already inside of NCHIP with one of our members. They had about 70 volunteer firefighters.
And they're familiar, Wake Forest.
That's right.
They're familiar with the Wake Forest merger. We've talked about that
Oh, yeah.
a little bit over the last couple of years, yes.
So, Ms. Miller, I think I would understand that we're asking the council to basically agree to keep the steps moving forward. And
That is correct. So certainly as additional questions come up or requests for information, we can provide that to council. But this evening, we would look for essentially a green light to move forward so that we can prepare for open enrollment and make sure we give employees the information and enough time to make the decision for a July 1 start.
Okay. I mean, that seems reasonable to me, but I respect the council's decision if you feel like you need a little more time. But this is, while we haven't discussed this specific item, that certainly the concept has been discussed on previous occasions. So any other questions for this gentleman? He may want to sit down, I don't know. Well, thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for your time.
We appreciate your time and the good information you shared with
You're
us, sure enough. So,
Thank
Council, I think it would be appropriate to ask if you want to discuss it a little further here now. I'm good with that, but otherwise, I think a motion would be in order that basically would confirm your agreement to have management to continue along this path and pursue this.
So moved. Second. And I'll say that as we vote, the opportunity to expand the network and open the network up for all employees and to do it basically the first year at the same cost, we'll say roughly at the same cost, is a huge plus. And if you look at the model, and they showed over 5 years, what you could save over 5 years, possibly, and that's when you get into about year 3 or so, or 4, or whatever. And then you look at the family plans and the spouse and the children plans, and that's how they'll figure out how you can cut some of those costs with some of that surplus. And so the monthly payments for the health insurance can help. And so while I think Rodney's right in the self-insurance plan has some pluses, but you're right, this is kind of if the I look at Wake Forest and Morrisville and Holly Springs have gone to it, and obviously they have, Wake Forest is Electric City and has fire. So these, they have over 300 employees. So I will take what some of our sister cities here in Wake County have done, and their positive experience, and I think it's a plus for the town.
Okay. Any other comment? So the motion is properly before council at this time to move ahead. Do we need to restate the motion? Does everybody know what we're voting on? Okay. So you made the motion. I believe you seconded. Is that right? Okay. So, council, I will ask you then to vote on the matter. If you favor this proposal, this motion, would you vote aye?
Aye.
Aye.
If there's opposition, vote no.
No.
Okay, motion passes on a vote of 4-1. And it is so ordered. And to our town management staff, I'm sure you will come back to us as the process ensues and keep us informed.
We will, and a big thank you to our Human Resources Director, Sabrina McDonald, for her leadership on this. This is a big step forward as far as being able to provide, I think, a plan that our employees have requesting, and not only short-term and long-term. And we look forward to working with NCHIP to implement the new plan. So we'll be working on the open enrollment piece on the staff side. From the council perspective, the next step is to bring forth to the council for final approval that interlocal agreement.
Okay, yeah, and I would echo your thoughts in thanking Ms. McDonald for the work she's already done, and the work she's going to do in the future, I guess, for sure. Anything else from council?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, and I'd extend the offer to Councilmember Dellinger that if you have any questions that come up, we'd be more than happy to sit down with you and even get NCHIP and Mr. Grigson involved if you have any concerns or questions that didn't get answered tonight.
Yeah, no, I may. And
Yeah.
my vote was I'm not going to vote yes on something I
Yeah.
don't have full information for myself on. It's not.
Yeah.
So I see all the pluses. Just have some. I know I'll have more questions. So.
Okay, well, the offer is made then to try to get those questions answered, Mr. Dellinger. All right, I'm going to move to the next item at this time, and that is a presentation from our attorney. In fact, she has several presentations tonight, I guess. But item number 2, railroad safety and hazardous materials. This was a matter that came up early on, and we had some questions. And so she's prepared this evening, I believe, to present information. Well, I know she is. It's in the agenda. But and the police chief, I guess, is also involved with this, Ms. Smith. So we will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have not prepared a formal PowerPoint presentation on this. You do have the memo in the agenda packet that I prepared with the assistance of police and fire providing information. But as you may recall, this came up as a citizen came to petitions and comments and raised the issue because there had been a fairly horrific train derailment in a small town in Ohio with a lot of hazardous materials, and seemed to be some delay in what exactly was the exposure and those kinds of issues. As I had commented that night, I was fairly certain that we're preempted, and indeed, I had a law student assist me with some research. So under the two main federal statutes, one is the Federal Railroad Safety Act, and the other the Federal Hazardous Materials Transportation Act. Both of them basically say that essentially local governments are preempted from regulating the railroads and their cargo. There are provisions for emergency response plans and notification regarding hazardous materials that are on freight trains that travel through town. But in speaking with police and fire, although the federal statutes talk about real-time data, there's really they're really not getting real-time data saying, a train is going through. And part of that's the volume of it. Part of that is not releasing information that could fall into the hands of terrorists who could use this to create a more hazardous situation in the town. So a lot of the information about hazardous materials cargo is confidential. It is available to Garner Fire Rescue, who would primarily be the first responder in any type of train derailment. And as I understand, police would secure the area and provide assistance. What I have learned from Chief Poole is that we're fortunate that the response team for our region is located in Raleigh, which is close to us. And they would be doing the mitigation type activity if there was a hazardous materials leak or spill. So we're fortunate with that. The emergency response tabletop exercise, which is coming up on May 2nd. Originally, they weren't going to include a train derailment, but because of things that have happened around the nation, that is being incorporated, as well as an industrial fire at a local recycling type facility that we have in town. The police department did want me to extend, if any of you want to participate in the training exercise on May 2nd, I can forward that link to you. I have signed up to participate. It's been a while since I've been in doing emergency management type legal work. So this was a good refresher for that. But with that, if you have any additional questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them. And Chief Poole and Chief Smith are here as well. But we have been fortunate here that we haven't had significant derailments or significant or any, hazardous materials type spills or leaks from the trains.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Jones. Questions for our attorney based on the information she shared and what's in our agenda and/or the training? I have some interest in that, but I need to check my calendar. What day of the week is that? Does anybody know?
Tuesday, May 2nd.
Tuesday, May
so
2nd.
Next Tuesday.
What time of the day, Ms. Jones?
I think it's
Next
9 to
Tuesday.
5 or 9 to 3.
Oh, my.
And my understanding is you could appear for some segments, maybe not the whole day.
Okay. We just need to let you know.
Yeah, you have to sign up.
Okay. All right.
And it would be, I'm sorry, it is at the police department in their training room.
Okay. All right, questions on this issue from council? Phil, you have anything?
No, sir.
Mr. Singleton?
Yes, sir.
Ms. Behringer?
No, thank you.
Mr. Dellinger?
Since the training itself isn't sort of broadly open to the public, Ms. Behringer and I sit on the board of DTA. Would it be possible to do sort of a separate presentation for like downtown residents and businesses to like kind of what's the outcome of this derailment training? Or it's mentioned here, property owners and businesses near the railroad, but I'm wondering if there'd be a way to do kind of a supplemental something at a later date to just kind of let them know that there's a plan. And I mean, I don't know.
Yeah. I'd have to defer to police and fire, but my understanding is the training, some interested, like property owners are included, but they're more the facility owners where the emergency might happen. Is that correct?
So the property owners that have been invited to this training are specific to the location where the scenario is going to take place. So just to make it as more realistic as we could, we wanted to involve those stakeholders so that, we could, better plan. And I think that, it would depend. So perhaps to answer your question, because each scenario is going to be different based on the location in which it occurs. And so right now for us, we have identified this one target or this target location in town, which could potentially be a big deal for us. So that's why we chose that location. So it depends.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, anything else for Ms. Jones on this issue? Okay, thank you very much for your research and the information shared. I guess I wasn't shocked that the town didn't have much authority to acquire information and or to stipulate what could come through, but the federal government pretty well has that covered, I guess. So, are we ready to move to the next item then, item 3, vehicle noise enforcement?
Thank you again, Mr. Mayor. So
Thank
moving
you.
on to my second topic of tonight, of one of many. Again, you've received several complaints, and the town has received several noise complaints, specifically regarding vehicles driving in Garner. These are some quotes from some of the emails that I've seen: intentionally backfiring or modifying exhaust system to sound like gunshots and as loud as trains. Vehicles with loud mufflers, engines, stereos disturbing the peace, and vehicles, direct quote, growling and thumping at an inappropriate level. So those are some recent noise complaints. As a result of that, council had wanted some information on what to do or what type of enforcement options there are.
Ms. Jones, if I could add to that list, motorcycle drivers winding it out on Creech Road, flying down the road. It would wake up the dead.
So specific to vehicle exhaust type noise, there is a state law that basically makes it unlawful to modify your muffler unless it's a modification that's been approved by NC.gov for air pollution and emission control devices. In talking to Chief Smith and her staff, it is somewhat difficult for the average patrol officer to determine whether an exhaust system has been modified. And the suggestion was it might be better addressed during the annual inspection by mechanics who would have, VIN, vehicle identification information, to be able to determine what was the manufacturer's installed. But it's my understanding, we just found out today, that this is a provision that Raleigh has used to charge, drivers of vehicles. However, according to the DA, none of them have gone to trial on that. They basically kind of get the ticket, then they go back and say that their muffler system is now in compliance, and they pay court costs, but they're not actually contesting whether they violated state law. I'm just found coal rolling to be like one of the interesting topics of this year, but again, this isn't exactly noise, but this just goes to show that this is an issue around the state, that there are 2 identical bills now pending to prohibit this, which is the diesel engines causing that big puff of smoke to come out. And if you look at this, cause a reasonable person to feel harassed, annoyed, or alarmed, obstruct or obscure the view of the roadway, or create a hazard to a driver, bicyclist, or pedestrian. There is no objective standard in this. This is a very subjective standard. This pending legislation would include funding to train officers on how to determine whether something is actually coal rolling or not. But basically, you already have the authority under state law to adopt an ordinance regulating, restricting, or prohibiting noises or amplified speech, music, or other sounds that tend to annoy, disturb, or frighten your citizens. So again, that's a very subjective type standard that's been authorized under state law. In the UDO, there are noise limits that are decibel levels, as you can see, based on whether it's residentially zoned, commercial, or industrial, dividing it between daytime and nighttime. And it does reference the American National Standards Institute. However, your planning department does not have any of these noise meters, so does not really have the authority to go out and and enforce it on a decibel level at this time. That would require purchase of the meters and training, and to some extent calibration and making sure that those noise meters are operating properly. However, when the planning department does get complaints, they do look at our noise ordinance and go out and a lot of the complaints are construction activity occurring, before it's supposed to, trash trucks operating before they're supposed to, those kinds of things. And because it's a time limit, it's a little bit easier standard to enforce. So Town Council has adopted a noise ordinance. It's located in section 11-15 of the Code of Ordinances. Goes back to 1974. It's not been amended a whole lot of times, but again, it does not contain any kind of decibel level or objective standard. Former Chief Binns had some experience with noise cases that went to court in which the judge did not uphold the criminal charge because there was not, an objective standard to determine that. And so there's been, I guess, less charging and enforcement because there's been a fear that they wouldn't be upheld, along with the question and what Chief Smith talked to the DA about was, even if we were to charge these, are they going to get prosecuted in court? Are they a priority for the district attorney's office as a criminal type matter to handle? So again, just to refresh you on the ordinance, it prohibits unreasonable noises. So the creation of any unreasonably loud, disturbing, or unnecessary noise in the town is prohibited. Again, noise is something limited to the town limits. It is not a police power that can be extended into the ETJ. So as far as things that happen in the ETJ, they're referred to the Sheriff's Department for Wake County. Again, it has to be noise of such character, intensity, and duration as to be detrimental to the health and welfare of any individual is prohibited. And what I know about the science of noise is that different people are impacted in different ways. Some people, if it's a very loud noise, that's more disturbing than a maybe not as loud noise that occurs over a long amount of time. So in determining that, it's sort of who's receiving the noise may be impacted differently by different types of things. But there are 3 provisions that particularly are addressed to vehicles. And the first one is the sounding of a vehicle horn or signal device that's unreasonably loud or harsh for an unnecessary and unreasonable period of time. I think some of the complaints the town receives have to do with commercial and industrial vehicles that are backing up or unloading, and their warning things are beeping, and when they're moving around vehicles and those kinds of things might happen. So those complaints come in from time to time. Again, you have to determine, is it unreasonably loud, and was it unnecessary, or is this a safety device that we want them to use those backup sensors. Then the other one, and the section numbers are the sections within the ordinance, is the use of an automobile, motorcycle, or other vehicle to create a loud and disturbing noise or unnecessary grating, grinding, screeching, and that should be of tires or rattling sounds. So that is one, like Councilwoman Behringer raised about the motorcycles, like doing on Creech Road. The other is the discharge of exhaust of any internal combustion engine except through muffler or other device, which will effectively prevent loud or explosive noises. So this has to do with these muffler alterations, which are prohibited under state law. Now, the difficulty in one of these, before I get to the current penalty, the difficulty is a noise complaint comes in, the police respond, is the noise still happening when they get there, and can they determine who was making that? And that's particularly hard with vehicles, or difficult to do with vehicles that are traveling through town, as opposed to residents who might be starting up their vehicle or tearing through the neighborhood or doing something like that. So currently, it is punishable as a misdemeanor with a fine not exceeding $100 or imprisonment of 30 days. Again, the police department responds to these complaints, and if they're able to locate the source of the noise, the process is to first educate the person, then to warn, and then follow up with a citation if it continues. We have some data on the types of calls for service. So in searching, my understanding from the police department, in searching their calls for service and looking at vehicle and noise in the complaint, you can see, it was fairly stable in 2021 and 2022, around 30. We're on pace for that for this year. And then ones that then specifically talked about mufflers or exhaust systems, a subset of those total car noise complaints or vehicle noise complaints are just a few of those in the last, 3 years of data. And as far as I know, in these last 3 years, none have actually been charged criminally and gone to court. Okay. So in thinking about what we can do is there is the option to add a decibel level or other objective standard, which would require purchase of equipment and training of officers or staff. Again, just adding that, you still have to respond and determine it. This works better where you have a stationary source, like an industrial plant or something like that. Your backyard rooster, something where you can really, the sound is coming from the same place at the same time. It doesn't necessarily work as well for vehicles that are traveling through town. One of the recommendations would be to change from a criminal violation to a civil penalty. This would allow police officers or other staff to issue a civil penalty. We wouldn't have to rely on the district attorney to prosecute the cases. It would be sort of a more immediate way of financially penalizing someone that you are able to catch in the act. Provide a private enforcement option. I talked to Fayetteville. They have done this, and when I pull up the ordinance amendment, I'll show you how that works, but it basically says, if you private citizen are annoyed by this noise, you can go, we authorize you to go file your own private case. Now, that citizen would bear the expense of suing potentially their neighbor or something like that. In Fayetteville, they didn't know whether there had been cases filed on this because the city was not a party to these cases, but they would say they had a dramatic decrease in barking dog and vehicle noise complaints in the city since they adopted this option. Now, again, they can't say that it correlates directly with that, but that it was a way to give citizens some kind of control over the situation. The other option would be to lobby the legislature to address these vehicle exhaust modifications during the annual vehicle inspection. So I'm going to open up for questions, but I will also pull up the ordinance amendment. So basically not changing any of the standards in it, but again, changing the penalty to a civil penalty in accordance with your other ordinances within the code, and then this enforcement by a private party. So those are with the police department, what police and legal have come up with as recommendations, but we're here to, happy to entertain any questions you have or, discuss this further. Obviously, if you want to go forward with ordinance amendments, that'll be brought back to you at a subsequent meeting for adoption.
Just a quick observation on my part. I was, while, our emphasis here has been on moving vehicles and so forth, I was pleased to note that item 5 under the section there talks about the keeping of any animal, birds, which cause frequent or longer continued. I remember before I became mayor, I got a lot of complaints from a particular house that was next door to persons who kept exotic birds, and these exotic birds had unusual squawking noises, and they seemed to deliver them often, and at a time when the neighbor was trying to rest. But at any rate, that's, to me, if we're going to have a noise ordinance, it ought to include something like that, and apparently this does. Thank you.
And again, under zoning, you allow backyard hens, but not roosters.
Yeah, that's right.
And, you know, I'll just tell you that in talking to planning staff, when the price of eggs went up a lot, the applications or interest in backyard hens permits also went up.
Yeah. Okay, council, your chance to ask questions of our attorney.
I'd like to just make a comment. I'll make some other observations later, but when it comes to the issues with the motorcycles, there's also a safety issue. That's a residential neighborhood, and you can hear the drivers make that turn onto Creech Road and then floor it, and it just scares the living daylights out of you. There's a lot of older people that live over there. There's tennis court, but even more so with new development that we have coming. That's an increased danger for, you know, motorcycles drivers not being reckless and hurting somebody.
Mr. Singley, any comments, questions?
We've dealt with this in the past, and I appreciate you putting some more, the enforcement by a private party sounds like a good option. So I appreciate you putting that before us.
Okay. Mr. Vance, anything?
But nothing to add, but looking at and agreeing with what Mr. Singleton said, enforcement by private party is, I think, unique and can be of benefit.
Okay. Mr. Dellinger.
Good work. It's a lot of work to look through all this and see what we can do. It seems to be something that's getting worse, and so the sooner we can address it and people can understand that this is what the ordinance is and this are the consequences of it, I think the better. Just people coming from different places with different sensibilities about their automobiles. I think you gotta start somewhere, so thank you.
Mr. Matthews.
So what do we need to do? Just move forward with all these changes we've got outlined in red? Is that what you're asking to?
Right. If you feel that this is the direction you'd like to go as either a first step or interim step, and see if this helps deal with the, you know, the complaints you're getting, certainly then I can prepare this for adoption at one of your subsequent meetings.
You know, it's not going to be easy. We know that, but it's one of those things where you've got to do it. You've got to have it out there that we are supporting this and that we're not, people will violate it, but we've still got to put forth the knowledge that we're not going to quit, that we're going to address it.
Okay. Other comments, questions?
I do. Quick question. So the decriminalization part was already done in the revision of the ordinance, or is it added to this to make it just a civil penalty?
Yeah, so when we went through the decriminalization process, we chose to keep this as a criminal penalty. But in relooking at it, and maybe it has to do with the change in the chief, but that a civil penalty might be a better approach to be, to have more control over the process. Issuing a civil penalty is more a right of way than going, you know, having to go through the court system, the criminal court system, and, you know, also part of this maybe movement of keeping the criminal courts for truly egregious things, and that this may be more of a nuisance type thing, although people who complain think it's certainly serious. I'm not denigrating their concerns about it. And like I said, the science about it is different people are impacted by noise in different ways, but this would actually give them, you know, also give the private individual some control over the situation without having to meet the kind of common law nuisance standard of quiet enjoyment of their property.
And I think the approach of the department on the, having the conversation and the warning, you're giving people multiple chances, and the civil gives you an actual thing you can do that's going to have some impact versus the criminal, which could go in any direction. So it gives you a lot more enforcement power, in a sense, than it being criminalized.
Okay, thank you. Just a quick observation, this probably doesn't need to be said, but anyway, we all have our stories and concerns about noise, but I remember when COVID was rampant in our town, and some of our places of worshipped outside. They went outside their buildings, and I know there was a location in our town where a gentleman complained rather vociferously about the noise from the outside service was excessive in his view. So, as what's the old saying? Beauty's in the eye of the beholder. I guess noise is in the ear of the person who hears it. But at any rate, this I think what is put together here is an attempt to make a way for people who feel like noises are a nuisance, and more than that, then this gives some provision for it. So, if I understand what would happen after tonight, you would pull this together and bring this back perhaps on a consent agenda? Is that?
Mm-hmm.
Unless.
Right, this is not the kind of ordinance that would require you to hold a public hearing. You could if you wanted to, but.
Okay. Council, are you in agreement with that plan of action? Everybody okay with that?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Jones, for your work on that, for sure. Council, we're not quite through yet. It's 8 o'clock. We've been in session for 2 hours. You want to take a short recess at this time and come back and finish the agenda?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Why don't you come back 15 minutes if you can, by say 8:15. I'll declare 15-minute recess. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to call the council back into session, and we will resume with our agenda. We're at item number 4, under discussion and reports, and I'll recognize our town manager who will lead us through this item.
All right, Mayor, Town Council, I'm presenting this on behalf of the Triangle J Council of Governments. We're a member of that organization, and what the councils of government do, there's 16 councils of government throughout the state of North Carolina, and they promote regionalism and just cross-jurisdictional cooperation for a number of things. For example, planning and the aging, services for the aging, water quality. They've done some work with affordable housing, our local Triangle J has. They've also done some special projects. A few years ago, we participated with them in what was called a sandbox exercise, and our police department was actually the chosen agency to go through that to talk about recruitment and retention of law enforcement officers. And I think they use some of that work as a model throughout the region. But they just do a variety of things to help bring local governments, including counties, cities, towns, villages, or whatever you want to call yourself, together to cooperate on things that could benefit the whole. And so what they're doing is the Triangle J, I think when the councils of governments were formed, they were all given a letter. And so our region was given the letter J, so they've been called the Triangle J. And over the years, that's become confusing because folks want to know what the J stands for, or some think that it only refers to the triangle, which some consider to be Raleigh, Durham, Chapel Hill. And so as Triangle J gets larger and broadens and takes on more cities and towns and counties, they think it would be prudent to change their name to something that represents more of the region that they represent. So they need 2/3 vote from the local government members, which means they need 32 of the 47 local government members to approve this name change, which would be a change in their charter. So they're asking that each municipality pass a resolution accepting this name change. And what they're looking to change to is Central Pines Regional Council. I provided some information on that, and there's a lot of symbolism in that. You know, North Carolina is known for its pine trees. The central would denote that they're more centralized in the state and not just the triangle. And they will continue to provide some of the same services. They're taking on, like I said, more and more governments. So it would just be a better way for them to distinguish themselves from some of the other regional councils. So the mayor is one of the delegates at Triangle J, and he may have some other information to offer, but I don't see an issue with this name change. So my recommendation is that the council accept the name change and change to the charter.
Thank you, Mr. Dickerson. Yeah, I think you covered it pretty well. The mayor before me was the town's delegate, and I assumed that role when I became mayor, was the alternate. I don't know if Mr. Dellinger knows, he is the alternate delegate there. And so, yeah, the Board of Delegates obviously has already approved this. It seemed to be a reasonable thing to do, and does reflect some of the growth of the region, and of course this organization that's been around for a while and will continue. So yeah, I joined the town manager in encouraging the council to vote in favor of this charter resolution, this name change. So any questions or comments from council? Any down your way, Phil?
Well, I got comments. The dumbest things I've ever heard of. If someone comes in here and you read the paper, Central Pines Regional Council, of what? Baseball, softball, high schools, arborists, Boy Scouts. There's several Boy Scout and Girl Scout organizations that have a similar name, but anyway, we won't even get into that.
All right.
I mean, if it's for governments, why should it say Central Pines Regional Council of Governments? Because it's a government organization. If you read it in the paper, then somebody's got to explain what it is because it's so bland, regional council. Churches, civic groups, As my teacher in IPS, Introductory to Physical Science, used to say in the 9th grade, if you wrote down, you did an experiment in the beaker or whatever, and you wrote 35 ml of what is it that you did? You explain what it is. I can't believe played a consultant to come up with this, but anyway, that's Gray's opinion. You don't define what the group is, or we're more stuck on honoring pine trees than saying it should say government because this is a government agency, but anyway.
Well, it's called a regional council now, which in some
government.
ways is, yeah.
What is the regional council of?
Well, it's of government.
But we know that. But
Yeah.
if you put it in a newspaper article, people aren't gonna know what it is.
I hear you. All right. Anybody else got a comment you want to make before we vote? Okay. So
I hate somebody to do this.
I will entertain a motion from council for approval of the resolution. I hope you will do.
Did you want to say something?
I was just gonna tell y'all some of the other names of some of the other regional councils, but I mean, I understand Mr. Singleton's point. I was just gonna say there's a lot of the others don't, a lot of them don't have government. Some do, some don't. So, yeah.
Well, this probably didn't help you, Mr. Singleton, but in terms of your dislike of this, but the obviously the short name for this that was commonly used amongst delegates was the TJ-COG. So you could make the same argument that the average person wouldn't know what the TJ-COG was.
No, but if you wrote it in a news article, you at least know it was a government agency.
Well, it didn't have the word government in it. I mean,
Council of Government.
well, I'm just saying,
Council
I'm
of
saying, but
Government.
if you called it TJ-COG, you
I know,
didn't.
but they wouldn't do a TJ-COG in a newspaper article,
Yeah,
except
well.
after you put what it stood for to begin with.
Right. Well, you're
Just
right.
like FRSA was in Miss Jones's part about the railroad, Federal Railroad Safety Act.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Once I read
Yep.
that, I knew what it stood for, but I had to find it. It took me a while to find it, but anyway. Go
All
right
right.
ahead, move on.
Okay.
Yeah, so the plan was to just introduce this and then put it on the consent agenda
Okay.
on
Okay.
the next meeting, official meeting.
Okay.
Yeah. Not necessarily a vote tonight.
It's fine with me. I would like to be able to go back as your delegate and approve it. So,
But I do need to know if everybody's fine with putting it on the
all right.
agenda. So-
You want to do a thumbs up, council, if you want to put it on the consent agenda? I see at least 3 thumbs and some not. So I think the majority would concur with putting it on the consent agenda. And bring it back at the next meeting, Mr. Manager.
All right.
Okay. All right, thank you very much. So we now come to the item 5, which is the last numbered item under this section. Meeting rules and procedures. You'll recall this is a carryover from our previous meeting where we had some discussions about this and some recommendations, I believe in particular from Councilmember Dellinger about some word changes. So I've asked Ms. Jones if she will to maybe guide us a little bit through this discussion and any review she wants to do. And you've seen the information that is in your packet. And if you want to refer back to the previous agenda, there's obviously the wording that is in there as well. So I recognize Ms. Terry.
So after we discussed this at our last meeting, I made some revisions, but if we can go a little bit out of order. So Rule 38, that's in your packet tonight, this goes back to your original rules that you had, which, changes it to whether you're filling a vacancy on council, which under state law has to all be done in open session. And my understanding is the previous time that this happened, it was something where all council members wanted to participate in the vetting of the nominee and vote on that person. So that would be, subsection 1 of Rule 38. Then subsection 2 is your process for your appointed boards and commissions. And then again, making that change that where there's a slate, you're voting on the slates rather than taking nominations from the floor. So I don't have any concerns about making those changes, and they seem to reflect what council's practice has been and wish to go forward. We talked about criticize and impugn. Again, in the event that certain members of council would feel that another council member crossed the line, there would be discussion on that. And, my personal opinion is that impugn is a bit of a stronger word than criticize. But again, it would be kind of determined on a case-by-case basis. And it's one of those, did you cross the line? It is it's not a mandatory, it is a provision that says you should avoid doing this. So as to whether you could be censured for this activity would remain to be seen. But again, I don't have any concerns about this. For the public hearings, if you want to adopt this language, that you're going to that council will call meetings as a consent agenda item like is done for annexations, which are required under state law. I would recommend that council delegate certain responsibility to the town manager for particular types of hearings. And those hearings would be, one, quasi-judicial hearings, because you really shouldn't be discussing them before they're on the agenda, and to the extent that you'd be voting on whether to call that as a hearing, then that would have to be disclosed as an ex parte communication, because it would be outside of the public hearing. So any quasi-judicial, that would include the special use permits, but that also might include appeals of certain things. And as you recall, you had a hearing on the demolition of an unsafe building. That technically is supposed to be a quasi-judicial type proceeding. I might have said that wrong. But there are other parts of the code where if you get certain appeals to you, which hasn't happened recently, but those will be quasi-judicial. The other ones are any other hearings where there is a specific notice provision that has a time limit or mailing to the public. For instance, under planning and zoning, that's 10 to 25 days before the hearing, and you have to mail notice, you have to post the property, and you have to publish it on the website. Because you get into that timing thing, I would recommend that be delegated. There are other situations, for instance, if you were to have an economic development public hearing, notice has to be done 10 days in advance of that. Generally, if it was an incentive for like a business location or something, you don't want to be, you might not want to be forecasting that, or the business might not want to be forecasting that too far in advance of the public hearing. So there's a certain class of different things that I would recommend that you just go ahead and delegate, because it adds a complexity of making sure that we're complying with state laws on the notice type provisions. But for other ones, you do have the right to call a public hearing on any issue before that, and generally that would come up either at petitions and comments or perhaps council comments, where you say, there's this issue, we want staff to, organize a public hearing or put a public hearing on the agenda. You can hold a public hearing on any item. You are required to hold certain public hearings before you can take action.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Jones. Councilman, you've heard of the presentation. Questions for Ms. Jones? Comments? I'll start with Mr. Vance on my right.
Yes, in reference to the one pertaining to the public hearings, and based upon what you have said, would this statement even be necessary? Based upon what you said, if we're delegating some of the authority to the town manager, and Is there a need for this?
I don't think there's a need in talking to the managers and staff. It adds a complexity for certain things, particularly for these ones that, as you see, are in addition to the ones required by law. There's already a process. But I would defer to Councilman Dellinger, who has the concerns about this. Would the delegation swallow the rule, the exception swallow the rule at this point?
Yeah, not necessarily, but I think the thought process was if we can plan far enough in advance to get an annexation public hearing on a consent agenda, the other types of hearings, save the quasi judicial ones you referenced, similar foresight could be given to those other types of public hearings and it not be disruptive. It's not disruptive to enough for an annexation for it to, like, once you do it and make that shift, it's pretty seamless. I mean, that's my logic. If we can do it for annexations, we can do it for zonings. And that's just my logic. And it's another checkpoint for us to know when it's coming and not actually have to report in any other way, if you didn't want to council that this is a public hearing that we're planning to schedule. It gets automatically brought to us as part of the process of setting the hearing. So it takes out the opportunity for error or oversight, or it just is part of the process. And that, I don't know, to me it just makes it more efficient and transparent. So
My next question, has there been a problem with that? Has there been a problem with public hearings not being called, or is there a reason for doing this that is substantiated by cases where something should have been done but did not happen?
I don't know that there's
I guess I'm trying
been a
to
problem
say,
with doing, there is, you have to determine the time frame, and because some of your meetings, there's 5 Tuesdays in a month, and some months there aren't, it does require looking at the calendar, and it would require another decision point. If you're putting it on the consent agenda, it would be another decision point in that whole process. There's already, for most rezonings, 3 meetings, the public hearing with council, planning commission, and then it comes back for a decision. Now you're adding a 4th meeting where it's on the consent agenda, and then I guess the question becomes, do you deny any of these requests? And if you're not going to deny any of the setting of the public hearing, then it's, to me, a notification issue. And if you want that to be put on the agenda as a report, what are the upcoming public hearings? I think that's something that can be done.
I think in lieu of making that as part of the consent agenda, for it to be included in our work session summaries, how the next month's agendas are being put out. If also a list of proposed public hearing notice posting dates was on there as well. So again, it's not a decision point, it's a notification instrument.
Right. So if you want council to be notified when public notice is going out, either being posted on the website or mailed, I think, not overstepping the manager's role, but I think that can be accomplished.
Yeah, I think
Most of you might be getting the alerts as to when the public hearing notices are going on the website. You might not know when they're going out to citizens in the area.
Yeah, and I guess that's sort of for clarity, it's not to know when the notices are going out, it's to know before the notices are going out. So if in the summary of the next month's agenda and the potential things at each meeting, also is a separate section of we're anticipating notice going out on these dates, and then what for, then we can know a week or 2 weeks ahead of when those notices go out. Because sometimes they coincide with what's on that month's calendar. Sometimes they don't, depending on what time of the month they go out. So I think we can strike this here and then work something out in sort of the Outlook planning part of our work session agenda overview. Does that make sense?
And the planning director's not here, so I don't know what comment he would have on that, but I don't know if your conversation, if that
And Jeff is out of town. He couldn't be here tonight, but in general, he had just said, we just need to know what council's needs are, and then we would work out a schedule. So I think as long as we have an opportunity to work on staggering some things that are already in the pipeline while we put this in place, because what it would cause us to do is that pending agenda report, if you got tonight's pending agenda report for the May cases, there's not a gap there, which I think is sort of how you were describing that. So we would likely have to push everything a month to be able to give you the notice, because when the March pending agenda document was done, we probably didn't know for certain whether the May case was going to make it or not. So there wouldn't have been a report that it could have been shown on. So we may have to create a gap in order to create that notice window. So I'm hearing what you're looking for now, so I think we can go back and try to figure out how to work that into a schedule.
or notify council off meeting schedule.
Yes.
Yeah, we can
A
certainly do
mechanism.
that, yes.
The notification doesn't have to be at the meeting in the.
Correct.
It
Right.
could be.
Yeah, I was just hearing Mr. Dillinger say as
Oh,
a
yeah,
part
yeah,
of the
yeah.
work session discussion,
Yeah.
but to do that, it's almost got to be a month earlier than we're currently doing it to capture the public hearings for the very next week. So, but hearing what you're saying, I think we can work out a schedule to make that work.
Well, let's just kind of look at an example here and see how that fits into the process. If you look under public hearings listed here in this agenda, mine's on page 86. It lists 2 public hearings set for May 2nd. Number 1, a pedestrian plan, and number 2 is an SUP, Garner versus Highway 70 Industrial. I mean, those kinds of things have been put into our agendas for some time now, I believe, as pending matters. And would that be an accurate representation, Mr. Manager, of probably
Yes,
what's
but-
going to go on that May 2nd agenda?
Yes, but I think Mr. Dellinger would like to know when the notification to the surrounding properties or parcels, when is that scheduled to go out?
Yeah, so it's a good example because it's showing what Mr. Hodges talked about, which is these hearings wouldn't have shown up on our April work session because those notifications went out. So,
Yeah. We've already noticed this one, Mr. Mayor, so that's why this listing tonight didn't accomplish what Mr. Dellinger is looking for, because notice has already gone out to the public on this hearing.
let's strike the wording in this and we can figure out that process notice piece. Because it is a notice, it's not a decision point issue. It's as you said, it's a notification issue.
And I do know that, the state law window is 10 to 25 days. Planning tries to target at 14 or 2 weeks, but because of holidays or something, it might not actually happen on, so it varies a little bit depending on, when they can get the mail out. And the mail might not necessarily go out the same day as the posting goes on the internet. All right, so if we take out the yellow language in this, I think there was consensus on going back to the appointment process, that you had that language. Then it's the criticize or impugn. Anyone
I had with the decorum, I had no trouble with that, and I had no trouble with the nomination and voting procedure.
Okay, so
Can we
I
get-
can
can we get 5 thumbs
incorporate
up?
these 2 changes into it and then bring it back to you for adoption. And then it would be effective, not the night you adopt it, but, thereafter.
Soon thereafter, yeah.
And
Okay,
the managers will work out a process for the notification.
so I've heard Mr. Singleton suggest a thumbs up on the wording as we have it here to be brought back to put on a consent agenda.
On decorum and nomination of voting procedure.
Yeah, on those two, for
Those
sure.
get incorporated, and if you recall, there was a resolution to adopt the meeting rules, and then there were some very minor ordinance amendments, so they would both come back to you on the consent agenda.
Sounds good.
So you want to recommend, see if council wants to do a thumbs up on that, and then, okay? I see a unanimous agreement on that. Okay? Thank you, Mr. Singleton. And thank you, Ms. Jones, sure enough, okay. Yeah, okay, thank you. Well, we're ready to move to managers' reports.
Which
which
Mr. Mayor's
deals
been
with
alluded
pending
to.
agenda reports.
Yep. The upcoming agenda report is in your packet. Always subject to change. As a disclaimer.
Mr. Dickerson, speaking of change, the pedestrian plan will not be coming forward, so that's another example of, we put it on thinking that we have the date of when it's going to be, but that one will push out.
Okay.
That's all I have.
All right. Any questions for the manager on his report? Okay, hearing none. We will go to council reports. I'll start on my right with Mr. Vance.
We just want to let everyone know that on tomorrow, we'll be traveling to Concord Mills for the City Vision conference for the next several days. We'll be out of pocket on that. And Mr. Dillinger and I will start interviewing for various openings on the boards and commissions in the upcoming weeks. And we will be bringing recommendations back to the council once that has been completed. And the question in reference to outstanding concerns relative to the traffic light timing. Have we received any word from NCDOT about the traffic light timing on the various intersections? The one at 70 and Duran, and also there's one on Jones Sausage Road that was concerned about proximity of Amazon. Any response yet? It's been several months.
I do not know. I'll find out if we've received a response and let you know.
Okay.
That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Vance. Mr. Dellinger.
Nothing tonight, sir.
Okay. Ms. Behringer.
Just a couple things. I'd like to thank Public Works and engineering for getting some repairs made to that little segment of St. Mary's Street between Garner Road and Main Street. There were it was difficult to drive on it sometimes because of the damage that had been done, but those repairs were made, I believe, yesterday, and that's very much appreciated. And also, we have a problem with the duplex 104, 106 West Garner Road, where the grass is over 2 feet tall, and I don't know that I've ever seen it that tall before. I know that the manager is working on going through the proper procedure to get it done, but at this point, any more time at all is way overdue because it's been months. But I would like us to develop a list of properties in town that are routinely out of compliance and that they would be looked at on a regular basis rather than a complaint basis only.
Yes, and we keep a list and track and log repetitive violators, and there's certain rules that we can apply to them.
So where are we with this property? I have never seen it.
So
like
this one,
this.
I should have probably verified that address, but our enforcement officer believes he's been out to the property you're referring to, but he thinks it's 108.
Okay.
And he has cited that already, and I think, I'm trying to find the email here, I think their time runs out sometime this week. Let me find that, because I don't want to quote the wrong thing here.
There was an article on the news tonight about being careful of snakes in tall grass right now this time of the year because they're out, and that grass is very tall and very able to hide some snakes in it. And it's leaning over the sidewalk.
Yeah, he thinks it's 108 West Garner, because there's not
Okay,
a
one
104 and 106.
is if the former cash house is 100, then the next one's 102, and the duplex, there are two numbers at the duplex, and it's the duplex.
Okay,
The corner, it's at the corner of Penny Street and West Garner Road.
okay. All right. Well, the one he was referring to, he had sent the violation last week, so I'll see if it's the same or something different.
Well, it would be really hard to miss that one,
Yeah,
being out of compliance.
okay.
And that's
If it
all.
is the same one, he says he'll work with Public Works to get it cut as soon as possible if they don't comply by Thursday. But we'll double check the addresses.
Okay, Mr. Singleton.
Nothing at this time.
Okay, Mr. Matthews.
Nothing, sir.
Okay. And I guess I'll harp on the potholes over at the post office. That seems to be a...
I've got my 2 bags of rock, and Mr. Singleton's agreed to help me go over there and
Okay.
dump them. So.
Actually,
I drove my Corolla the other day and actually almost got lost in one of them. The one in front of the post office is so big, then there's 3 or 4 on the other side. And this is a difference in how people respond. I was at Biscuitville last weekend picking up something for my guys in the morning, and there was a pothole at Anaron Court right where the parking lot intersects. And so I didn't know if it was the town's responsibility or Biscuitville, so I emailed Mr. Jones and said, hey, could you look at this? I don't know if this is the town's responsibility or not. This was a good size. This was almost as big as one, not quite as big as one from the post office, but it was close. Went by there today, town's already repaired it, cleaned it up and repaired it like it's supposed to be. Because Mr. Jones said it was a town responsibility if it's Anaron Court. And it was right where it bordered and it's taken care of. That's called prompt response, to do something where the owners of the shopping center aren't promptly responding and do a whole lot. I know they've said they're working on it, but the ones there can't just be patched. They need to be cut out and repaired. That's the problem because it's so deep, but Ms. Miller's going to respond.
I just wanted to provide an update to council. I've received an update from Director Jones, and we have reached back out to the property owner on this issue and the property manager. We haven't got a response back, but we are trying to diligently follow up. So as soon as we hear more, we'll share that with council, but just know from a staff perspective, we are trying to follow up and trying to work with the property owners and managers.
okay, I believe I've covered everybody. I'd like to just take a moment to thank our attorney for the work she's done on the rules and procedures. Sure it took some of her time for sure. And also she is, as you know, been sending the updates regarding some legislative bills on a regular basis, which I find helpful, and I'm sure our department heads do as well. So thank you for your work there, Ms. Jones. Okay, I believe that's all I have. We have a closed session that we need to have. So somebody want to give us a site and make the motion? I guess we'll
I
go to
move
closed
that
session.
we go to closed session pursuant to NC General Statutes 143.318.11, subset A5, to discuss possible real estate acquisition and the town's negotiating position regarding such real estate.
Second.
Okay, motion properly made and seconded. If you favor the motion, would you vote aye?
Aye.
If there's any opposition, no. All right, we'll get a signal from folks out. is back into regular open session. Having gone into closed session to hear from my attorney, I'm going to ask her if she will to give a brief summary of the closed session items.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The council provided direction to staff on the acquisition regarding two different property acquisition projects. Council did authorize the adoption of resolution number 2023-2530, which would be a resolution of intent to acquire easements needed for storm drain improvements on Forest Ridge Road by negotiated purchase if possible or by eminent domain where required. With respect to another property acquisition, council provided direction to staff on a negotiating position, but is not ready to exercise, or it would thwart the purpose of the closed session to identify that action at this time.
Okay. And so, Mr. Attorney, I believe now that we're back in open session, we need to ask the council to vote on the resolution 2023-2530. Am I correct on that?
I believe you voted in closed session, which is permissible in these
Okay,
circumstances.
excuse me. Okay, fine. All right. Anything else from council? And what did you mention to me, Rodney?
Yes, Ms. Miller's
Oh,
going to give
excuse me,
you all
yeah, I'm
a
sorry.
quick update on something of
Please,
interest.
yes.
Sure, just wanted to let the council members know that on Thursday of this week, the 27th, we're going to be delivering the recommended FY24 budget to you. And the manager will be delivering his budget message in next week's meeting on May 2nd. So just wanted to make you aware we'll be delivering those. If you have special requirements about where you'd like for us to leave it, if you just wouldn't mind sending me an email, I'd appreciate it. It'll probably be the afternoon of Thursday afternoon is when we're going to deliver.
Okay. Any questions for Ms. Miller? Was that it, Mr. Manager? Okay. Council, is anyone else aware of any other business that need to be taken care of at this work session? Hearing and seeing none, I believe a motion to adjourn is in order.
Second.
Okay, motion properly made and seconded. All in favor, vote aye.
Aye.
If there's any opposition, no. There is none. So I declare this work session to have been successfully completed and call an adjournment.